is your WESN News on the Hour. I'm Naomi McNish. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Robbery accused granted bail. Vandals hit Carpichaima West Secondary. Contractor freed of $600,000 fraud charges. And internationally, plastic eating bacteria produces painkillers. Now for the details. An 18-year-old man charged with robbery with violence, malicious damage, and interfering with a vehicle has been granted $150,000 bail. His father agreed to stand as surety when he appeared before the North Masters Court earlier this week. The teen must report to the Sandy Grande police station twice a week, observe a nightly curfew, and live at an address in Sandy Grande. The case has been transferred to the Sandy Grande Magistrates Court and adjourned to October 15th. Police say the charges stem from a September 11th incident in which a driver was attacked and robbed of his vehicle. One suspect was arrested days later and subsequently charged. Police are investigating after vandals struck Carpichaima West Secondary School on the night of September 24th. The intruders overturned bins, broke into classrooms, and damaged the school's security booth. An MTS estate constable told police he heard noises around 11 p.m. but found nothing when he checked. On returning, he discovered torn diary pages, scattered papers, and damaged classroom latches. Nothing appeared to have been stolen. Police are reviewing CCTV footage to identify the suspects. A La Romaine contractor has been cleared of 6 fraud charges, 8 years after being accused of using fake checks to defraud the state of nearly $600,000. Master Whitney Franklin discharged Ian Jahor on September 25th, after the state admitted it could not sustain the case. Jahor's attorney argued the prosecution's evidence was inadmissible and key witnesses were not called. The state ultimately conceded, leading to Jahor's release. Internationally, scientists at the University of Edinburgh have engineered the common bacterium E. coli to turn plastic waste into paracetamol. The breakthrough is part of a wider effort to repurpose microbes for sustainable solutions. E. coli has long been a workhorse in biotechnology used in producing insulin and other vital chemicals. While some experts warn its dominance may overshadow better natural alternatives, researchers are exploring new organisms such as Vibrio nitrogens, which grow faster and could hold greater industrial potential. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Naomi McNish. Thanks for watching.
WESN.
Well, this is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. Hello, everybody. Stay with us as we continue to talk about the nation's business. Let's tell you what's happening in this edition of the program. Let me just read from an article in the Express, the Sunday Express. It's the 7th of September. The headline is PM must act to raise the exchange rate. And the subhead on top of that is that Elias knocks Imbert's forex policies and he warns of an economic collapse. That Elias is Emil Elias. Let's just tell you some of what it says in the piece here. Executive Chairman of NH International Caribbean Limited, Emil Elias, has appealed to the Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissessar to raise the US dollar exchange rate from $6.80 to $9. The current exchange rate is $6.79 for $1 according to the central bank. In a statement to the Sunday Express yesterday, Elias described former Finance Minister Colin Mbe as the worst in the country's history, adding that his, quote, reckless, unquote, decisions on foreign exchange and the economy were aided by former Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley. He said history has now placed responsibility on Persad-Bissessar's shoulders and suggested she empower the central bank governor to manage monetary policy, interest rates, and the exchange rate, while the finance minister focuses on fiscal matters such as the national budget and expenditure levels. And he's quoted as saying, if you act decisively, your legacy would be that of the leader who restored sanity to the exchange rate eliminated the black market, rebuilt reserves, and restored Trinidad and Tobago's credibility, he said to the Prime Minister. There's much more in the piece here that we will try to see how much of that we could get into as we welcome him to the other side of this discussion. Mr. Lai, good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you too. It's been a long time.
Yeah. So let's talk about this. I think when I first called you on it, you said that I think you were saying that the issue of the exchange rate 9-to-1 is you'd said you'd taken less responsibility for it than appears in the piece. Let's talk a little bit about that. Did you not say that?
But I think your program is meant to inform and educate people, and
by all means.
Sometimes when someone speaks out, and I have always spoken out for the last 50 years, people sometimes assume there's a personal motive. If the exchange rate is adjusted, all contractors will suffer because we all have fixed cost contracts. That's the first point. But I think what this debate needs, and we need to ask the economists and professors at UWE and commentators, very good commentators around, is to explain to people certain basic truths. There are truths we can agree on. Number one truth, we cannot continue the way we are going, which is that we have a de facto fixed rate of exchange, creating a huge shortage of foreign exchange, and the central bank makes up in part by pumping our valuable reserves into the banks to sustain this grossly overvalued exchange. That's the first truth. Second truth is this can't continue, because within 3 years, at the current rate of depletion of our reserves, we will have zero reserves, according to my information from high-level sources. 3 years. So we can't wait until 3 years and win a huge fight. So we have to agree that the present behavior and the present understandings we have cannot continue. If they do, and we run into trouble, then the IMF comes. And the IMF have a known prescription. Everybody knows what they will do. Change the exchange rate, cut subsidies, cut jobs, all this sort of normal thing, cut government spending. So we have to agree that this cannot continue. So what are we going to do to change it? The thing is that even now, everyone is talking about diversification, excellent, long term, medium term. But even if we increase foreign exchange earnings, which is the side of the equation that everyone talks about, because really the issue is an imbalance between supply and demand. But if you increase supply, the earners of that foreign exchange, they're not going to come and put the money in the bank in Trinidad at 6.88 when they can get a much higher rate, say $9 on the black market. So it doesn't find its way into the supply side. So we need to agree how we are going to reduce demand, because it's the demand that is driving the leakage of foreign exchange, the demand for it, and so on. Demand is high at that price. So unless you change the price, and no matter how much foreign exchange you put into the system, whether you draw it from the Heritage Fund, let's say you draw $1 billion down, US dollars, put it in the bank. We all have a good time for 6 months. But in 6 months, all that is gone because it's a cheap sale price of US dollars. So you need to change the demand side. And to do that, you adjust the exchange rate. Now that's medicine. Ask anybody, oh no, we don't want that. Oh no, we don't want that. What we want is more foreigns. Fiddling with the allocation process does not help anybody. It just means you change those who were getting it before to those who now want to get their hands on the trough. Businessmen love that, who have access through Exim Bank or whatever process. I'm not one of them. I have no foreign exchange. I get none from the banks, none. I get 16,000 US every month from one of my banks. That's my allocation for the month, 16,000. That and nothing is the same. So we can't run a business that way. Hence, we are largely offshore. So let's talk about how do you reduce demand. If you change the exchange rate, all you're doing is catching up with an economy that has largely priced 8.50 and 9 to 1 and whatever they're paying on the black market into their goods. And interviews in the newspaper recently, we saw them. People are openly admitting they used to use credit cards, and that was almost became like a scheme. One businessman told me he had 43 cards, and he was using that to run his business for years until the card's allowance per month was reduced. And they're telling you now when they're interviewed, and then we have to buy on the black market. So obviously, a lot of the inflation that people think might happen has happened already. And inflation is the lowest in the Western Hemisphere. We're like under 2%. And a lot of the new exchange rate is priced into goods. However, the poorest have to be protected. We have a society, we're a family. That's what we are, a family of citizens. So you need to increase the minimum wage. And I would urge businessmen to stop with their bleating and
with their what?
Crocodile. Yeah, they have to stop this foolishness. There's nothing negative about looking after the poorest in our society and increasing the minimum wage. And if you do that, you mitigate the problem.
All right, since I was leaving that for a little later on, but since you introduced it, because that was the last paragraph in the report from your statements that was carried in the Express on September 7th. It says that you added that delay is the path of ruin. Adjustment will be painful, but it can and must be managed with fairness and compassion. You said the genuine poor must be protected, while those who can afford it should shoulder more. The path forward is clear. What do you see as the contours of that protection that you think is an absolute necessity?
Right. Well, there's a key word there. It says the genuinely poor.
Yeah.
Now, I draw your attention to the recent months where there were graduation. We become like America now. Everybody's graduating. Every child is graduating from something to something. In the Hyatt, in the Hilton, people are dressed in what I call gongs, right? And zoot suits. And these are the very people who are saying things hard, but they get practically free electricity and water, practically free. They get, so we need to find the genuinely poor. And when you start identifying them, and you have to have some benchmarks, how do you define who is really poor? But nevertheless, we go with an increase in the minimum wage. But I am saying that those people who benefit from the increase in the minimum wage will have less impact because they're not buying foreign goods. They're not going on Amazon. It's the middle class and the upper classes, right? So I'm saying mitigate it. Change the electricity rates for the higher consumers. If you're a small consumer and those are the least well off in the society, you mitigate that. Higher minimum wage. So you can soften the adjustment of this bitter medicine, but nobody wants to face the reality now. But what they want is more Forex at 680, more diversification, which will not bring Forex into the official system. There's a flourishing black market, but no one knows the extent of it. It's not measurable. So if you want to remove that parallel market, open up the system, you have to adjust the exchange rate. If you don't do that, no matter how much you increase supply, the voracious demand for Forex is there and it's going to swallow up whatever you produce if it even gets into the system. So look after the poor, but the middle class and the rich have to pay more for everything. They have to. And you have to adjust. Coming to another point, the economists talk in this fancy language, but nobody quite understands. But when you run a huge deficit, what you're doing is pumping Trinidad and Tobago dollars into the system, put billions into the hands of people. All that sounds good. But that in itself creates a demand for foreign supplies at this cheap sale price of US dollars that we have. Unless you adjust the exchange rate as one element, by the way, one element of a basket of measures that have to be taken to balance the economy and genuinely bring the budget into balance. We cannot run huge deficits indefinitely. Everybody knows that.
Yeah.
But they keep kicking the bucket down the road. And Imbert was the worst of all to do that. He was the worst. He's the author of all these problems.
But he didn't keep himself in the position. You raised some of that, how he was able to remain as Minister of Finance for 10 years.
But that's a question Rowley has to answer. But I'll go another step further. Even in today's newspapers, there were two interesting articles. One is Jamaica has just been upgraded. Jamaica has no oil. They've just been upgraded, and with an outlook, a positive outlook. With our negative outlook, and the budget's coming up is also going to be another deficit budget, because there's all these things that you've promised that you want to deliver on your promises. But next year, according to today's newspaper of S&P's report, we have $1 billion US of debt coming due next year that has to be refinanced. We can't pay it. Everybody knows that. So you have to borrow $1 billion to pay off the $1 billion to those who lent it to us. Just think, with this negative outlook and a potential downgrade, which would put us into junk bond territory. People need to understand what that means. Junk bond means the interest rate you're going to be asked to pay for $1 billion US you need to borrow to pay the other $1 billion you now owe coming due next year.
That's a real possibility.
No. Sorry?
That's a real possibility.
No, it's a fact. We have $1 billion US coming due next year. It was reported in today's paper, and I knew that as a fact from other sources, right? But we have to refinance it. Now, if we go to the market to borrow $1 billion, the interest rate we're going to have to pay if we have a negative outlook, or worse, if we're downgraded before we go to the market. Any downgrade, we are at the margin of investment grade right now, right at the margin. Any downgrade puts us into junk bond territory. Junk bonds are going to be 2 to 3% interest higher than we're currently paying on the debt that's maturing next year. Borrowing, and yet you have to pay it back in US dollars. So unless you take measures to reduce demand, it's the demand side that needs to be solved, not just supply.
Yeah.
Yes, supply. Yes, diversify. That's the future. We agree all of that. Everybody's talking about diversify, and I hope this government is as serious as they sound. I mean, yes, we have entrepreneurs in this country. If you encourage them properly, they can go out there and earn forex. But if they do, they don't bring it into the system at 680, because they can get $9 or $8.50 outside. So I'm saying adjusting the exchange rate has multiple benefits. One is it will dampen demand. Two, you can mitigate that medicine by looking after the people who most need it, and that is those who are working on minimum wage.
Yeah.
Three, you've got to stop so much subsidies and transfers. Electricity rates could be increased, not necessarily for the poor. They can be increased for the upper class and middle class who can afford to pay it. The water rates, the same. So unless you do these things as a package and reduce your fiscal deficit, then we are going to end up in 3 years with no foreign exchange. And that is something that is unthinkable.
So you are advocating that kind of thing happen, and you want to see some decision making around the issue, and you expect that will happen because you think it's an inevitability that we have to address the matter, such as you're pointing out there. There's no escaping it.
Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar is a master politician, right? And if she sees the benefits of what Jamaica has done, both sides of the island, Jamaica, agree and agreed with the IMF program. We down here seem to, if you go in opposition, you have to attack even the good things that government does. Both sides do the same thing. But we need to have a courageous leader who can see that the present situation cannot continue. That is a fact. It's a given. We can't continue like this. Second thing is, no matter how much foreign exchange earnings you increase, it doesn't help because it's not coming into the system. The black market is flourishing and growing, but we don't know how big it is. If you don't adjust the exchange rate and make all of those transactions come into the formal system, you can then measure it and you can take steps so that when people earn foreign exchange, they're happy to put it in the bank in Trinidad and convert it to TT dollars because they know when they want to pay a bill in US dollars, they can go and buy it back from the bank. It's what I used to do and we used to do after 1993 when Patrick Manning and Wendell Motley freed the currency. This is what they did, they freed it. But at the same time, there was an adjustment in the exchange rate of 35%. 35%. And there was no inflation after 1 year because there's an initial, changes and then everything settles down and then forex reserves started to grow and the economy flourished. And when I earned foreign exchange offshore, which we do as an international construction company, we brought it into FCB, converted it to TT dollars, and knew that whenever we had a bill to pay, we go back to the bank, we can buy the dollars. It's as simple as that. But right now, that freedom that we enjoyed since 1993, as a result of Imbert's and with Rowley's support, I might add, behavior since 2015, when he called people who were holding on to dollars speculators and pejorative and nasty words like that, we don't want that anymore. We want the freedom to invest in our country, knowing that if we wanted to send money for the education of our child or for medical reasons, we don't have to line up in a bank and beg like we used to do in the 80s. We don't want to go back to controls, negative lists, you can't bring cars in. But by the way, only yesterday, no, 2 days ago, I was having lunch with somebody and they said the motor car companies are all bringing in cars with dollars from the black market. That's what he said. I don't know. And they're pricing it to suit. And he claims that a lot of big businesses are doing the same because you have to continue working. And you cannot operate on the basis that you can't get forex.
So is it a fact that, from what you're saying there, that there are people in authority who could address these issues, but they're not doing it, and they're turning a blind eye to what is happening?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's what Imber did. He knew. The central bank knows. Everybody knows there's a flourishing black market. Everybody. Let me give you one example of how it damages the economy. NH was awarded a contract of $450 million by UDCOT 18 months ago. 18 months ago. And the job is in suspension. It could have created 600 jobs. They would have had spin-offs downstream, inevitably, $450 million. To build, it was fully financed by NH, by the way, fully financed, a bolt. For those who don't know what it is, NH finances, builds the building, and the government pays over 15 years a quarterly installment, at the end of which they get the building for $1. Right. No, it doesn't go on the national debt. It does not require government funding except for the quarterly installments after the job is finished. We listed the foreign exchange requirements to build that building. Came up to 20 million US. 20 million US. You know what the banks told us? We don't have a single dollar, not a dollar, that we can give you to build that building. So the building is in suspension. We went to UDCOT, who said they would talk to the Ministry of Finance, Minister of Finance, Imbert. He vetoed it. We have a letter saying the Ministry of Finance says, no, there's no forex. So we then said, okay, we will borrow the 20 million US from the bank. They have US to lend, but they can't sell it because it's not theirs, it's depositors. We go back to them, we say, okay, we will provide the 20 million US. and you paid that portion back in US dollar installments. The rest would be in TT dollars. Well, 18 months later, all we can get from them on several occasions, including up to a month before the elections, was we're consulting our lawyers. So, I mean, just that one example shows you cannot even build a government building. And NH has had to wait, and we're now waiting on the new government. Of course, we have to give them time to work out what their priorities are. But it's an example where we were unable to build a 450 million fully financed building because we could not get any for it, not a dollar. Both leaders of the two biggest banks said to me, not $1. Those were the words they used, as though they were rehearsed. They said we have to hold on to all we have for credit cards. That's our first demand. So everybody was going to a credit card. But I can't build a $450 million building with credit cards.
Yeah.
Trying to get 20.
I want to ask you, to what extent, since you made this statement and it got such I suppose, high-profile coverage, has anybody in or from the government sought to reach to you to find out how this conversation could continue? And anybody seeing what you're saying has wisdom in it? From the government?
I haven't been reached out. Unfortunately, well, I think their hands are full. I think they want to, make their case in the budget. My view was in taking this public position, and people will realize I haven't spoken out publicly for many, many years. I guess I'm kind of retired from speaking out in public as much. But I could not hold back because the economy is in danger. And we need courageous leadership, not people who are putting politics before reality. We need to make sure we can explain to people that the government has inherited an economic mess and 10 years of a quite stupid exchange rate policy. Totally stupid. And it's not that they didn't know. It suited them to say, look, we're the good guys, no inflation. They didn't want to even allow the central bank these minimal managed floats where you could just adjust. Over 10 years, we could have adjusted the exchange rate, which might have been $7.50 or $8 today, say. But it would have slowed down the rate of depletion of our reserves at the very least, if not bring it into balance. And there would be no crisis. And people adjust. They eat less apples and grapes. Eat a PY instead, for God's sake. Eat a pomerac. You don't need apples and grapes to survive. If you're thirsty, you could drink water. You don't have to drink some fancy imported bottled juice or whatever and whatever. You make adjustments. That's what you do when you have to adjust. And then the medicine would not have been bitter. Now it's going to be quite an adjustment for some people, but not for the poor, because we can mitigate that. And I predict that if the exchange rate is adjusted, inflation will be only people who are talking inflation. The real inflation is already factored into most prices. So all they have to do is stay with the basics, eat beans and local foods and their chicken. We have a lot of, but maybe big chicken sellers will have a drop in sales. So what? Let it be a drop in sales. I don't have to go and buy, prepared food. All the malls with their food courts might have less sales. Maybe some of them will close down. So what? Let it close down. People can bring a sandwich from home if they have to eat.
What would be the advantage to be derived with that kind of
Okay, there are several advantages. Number one, it immediately shuts down the black market if you adjust the rate. There's no need for it because all the money would go into the banking system that is currently in the parallel market. It's not really a black market because we have a freedom of currency. Anybody can hold US dollars. So it's the parallel market is what we're talking about. But stop that, number one. Number two, it will give confidence to people who want to invest in Trinidad, who have money abroad, And trainees do have a lot of money abroad. And it's not just the so-called 1%. Everybody has money abroad because they're holding on to it. NH is an international company. It has worked in 11 countries. So obviously we earn foreign exchange, but the foreign exchange we earn, it's impossible to finance construction in Trinidad. It's too big. We just don't have that kind of money. But it would flush that out, bring it into the system. It then means that people who want foreign exchange can go to the bank, but they're willing to pay the price. Now, bear in mind, Andy, at the airport, people are paying 9 to 1 for a US dollar in the cambios. It's already being sold at 9 to 1 legally. So if you open cambios all over Port of Spain now, suppose they license another 50 or 100 cambios, well, we won't need the banks. Everybody will go to the cambio and sell their dollars for $7.50 or $8, and then the cambio sells at 9 or whatever, and people are buying it. So what is the difficulty in accepting those realities and saying, look, guys, this can't continue. We need to reduce demand. That is why you need to adjust the exchange rate. Adjust the exchange rate. People use bad words like devalue. We are not devalue. We are a free currency. And right now, people are selling and buying dollars at all kinds of prices. So we need to bring that back into the mainstream as we did in 1993. And it worked very well until 2014. When the governor at the time started this foolishness of saying who were the big users, and because he was justifying holding on to the exchange rate as it was. In fact, he appreciated it to 632, I think. But that was unrealistic.
So is there any way in which there are people who either in or close to and related with people in the government, I mean business or personality wise even, who are saying to you, this is where we have to go, we just have to find a way to do it, or there are people who
that I can say yes to. That I can say yes to. But I can't call names.
Right.
That I can say yes to. There is a strong body of opinion in the country at all levels that realize you have to adjust the rate. It's the only way you can reduce demand, and increasing supply will not work. If even you drew $1 billion down from the Heritage Fund tomorrow, pump it into the banks and say, give more forex to people. That will last, what, 6 months? Maximum. And then they're back to the shortage again. Draw another $1 billion down. And every time you draw down from the Heritage Fund, remember, the international agencies know what you're doing. So if that fund starts to deplete and your official reserves continue to deplete, even at the current rate of depletion, but people are asking for more for it, so it might deplete faster, then we are going to be inviting the IMF to come and give us the prescription that we can avoid if we just take the measures now. That's my point.
So it says here that you're calling on the Prime Minister to raise the rate and make these changes now, sooner rather than later.
Well, I understand her political challenge. In the election, you want to win an election. So the PNM, and I said it in my article, were reckless in accusing the UNC of planning to take the exchange rate to 15 to 1, terrorizing people. So then they rebutted by saying we have no intention of quote-unquote devaluing. Why they use that word, I don't know. Adjusting the exchange. So it was an election promise. But I am sure that the government today did not expect to find the economic mess that they have found. The shortage of money in every respect. They have to be scrambling because they inherited a monstrous deficit budget. And deficit budgets mean the difference between what you spend and what you earn. You have to borrow. And that deficit is close to 10 billion TT dollars they have to borrow. And they haven't satisfied the public sector workers yet. They haven't satisfied a lot of the things they said they would do. These things have to be done. So I call on the Prime Minister to explain to people why that particular promise may need to be changed, i.e., she said they would not adjust the exchange rate. But that was in response to a reckless accusation. Reckless would want to go to 15 to 1. We don't need to do that. When Patrick Manning and Wendell Motley took us from 450, 425 rather, to 575, there was no continued spiral downwards. People are talking about where it's a slippery slope. Some people whose comments I've read, I am really disappointed. They have doctorates and massive degrees, but no blinking common sense. None. Because common sense dictates that if you don't sell a product, i.e. a US dollar, at a market price, of course you create a demand. The day you change the selling price, the demand will change. And my final point, again, increasing supply, which is wonderful, and I'm very happy and look forward to all the issues of diversification we've been hearing about. None of that will solve the problem. None, no matter how much you increase supply. If the demand is so voracious, fueled by this cheap sale US dollar exchange rate to TT of 680 to 1, it's a cheap sale.
Yeah, you think it is possible to believe that while the current regime is trying to, and the leading figures in there relative to this issue, as we speak, trying to find the means by which to do what you're suggesting, and it's.
I'm firmly of the view that they are addressing that issue, but they are no doubt weighing the political cost. But I'm saying, look at Jamaica. The government won a third term. The exchange rate is 160 to 1. We don't have to go there. We have to manage ourselves better than Jamaica did. That caused them to now be upgraded after a long IMF program. And they took the bitter medicine. We don't need bitter medicine. We just need a little cough syrup and a little Tylenol or something. But we need to do something that helps us to understand that there is no way you can fix this problem without fixing demand. Supply only, waste of time.
What is the otherwise?
Because if you increase supply, it will never satisfy the demand that is so voracious that people are paying 9 to 1 on the black market because they need money to do something. They want to go on holiday. I know of one salaried lady. She borrowed money from the bank, flew to Miami, and went to a Taylor Swift concert, had to pay $1,000 for a ticket, and then they say there's a shortage. I don't know. I mean, can you control that? I don't know how you can control it. Go back to the old days of the 80s. We're old enough to remember ECO. You had to go to the bank and beg for $500 to go for a medical in Miami, or $10,000 or whatever. I know one person used to get a fake medical saying he had a suspected cancer and would go to the central bank, say, please give me $10,000. I have to go to Miami, try and save my life. And was just to get the $10,000 out. I know of that person. Fake that was in the 80s. We don't want to go back there. We don't want to fool ourselves into thinking adjusting the allocations because this one getting more and the bank favoring this one and the bank favoring the big fellas. Everybody wants the cheap sale figure so they can say anything they want. I could say what I'm saying today because I know I got no foreign exchange, none. And a 450 million job is sitting in abeyance waiting for somebody to say, yes, it's a government contract. We will get you the 20 million US over 2 years. So far, no news.
I was going to say that some people say that no news is good news. What they mean is that news is always bad.
We are trying to make efforts to reach people to say, but look, you know, something has to be done. We all agree something has to be done. But what? What can we do to bring supply and demand into balance? Increasing supply alone will not satisfy the voracious demand at 680. It's as simple as that. You have to reduce demand. And you can't reduce demand by more and more controls. Okay, this is on the negative list. You can't bring this. You can't import cars. You bring 12-year-old cars, used cars. You do this. All of these are tinkering with the market. The answer is let the market decide. And so a first stab would be 9-1. That's a first stab. That would bring all the black market into the mainstream system where the central bank can then actually monitor what is coming in and going out.
Yeah, we got to go shortly, but let me leave us with this, and I'll let you explain that. The final paragraph in this piece from the Express on September 7th says, they're quoting you here, delay is the path of ruin. Adjustment, yes, it will be painful, but it can and must be managed with fairness and compassion. The genuine poor must be protected, while those who can afford it shoulder more. The path forward is clear.
Well, first of all, there's a food stamp program. If you identify the genuinely poor, if basic foods go up, like imported beans, red beans, black eyed peas, goat meat, chicken, whatever, you can have food stamps to mitigate the impact of this adjustment on the poor. Raise the minimum wage, absolutely critical. Raise the minimum wage, and then you can start to think of reducing transfers and subsidies. Electricity is an easy one. The recommendations are there from the commission that we can adjust the electricity bill and mitigate the impact on the genuinely poor. If people are using $500 every 2 months, obviously those rates need not go up, and if they go up by very little. So yes, you have to have a basket of measures to mitigate the impact on the genuine. Where you cannot mitigate is telling people if they go to a Taylor Swift concert and they're paying $1,000 US for a ticket, that ticket is going to cost you 9,000 TT now instead of 680 using a credit card. And therefore, what's the problem? If you can't go to Taylor Swift, buy a CD and listen and look on a screen and see her. I don't know.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for having me.
We will continue in the discussion.
Yes, thank you again.
Thanks a lot.
Hope your listeners enjoys what I had to say, at least educationally.
Certainly. I know there are people out there who respond to it like that. I'm sure I'm going to run into people, or people run into me to discuss it. That's what happens when some things touch people in this kind of way. Thank you very much.
Thank you again.
This has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
WESN.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.